Hello, internet friends, cats,
Hello, internet
crittens.
friends, cats.
Hello. Welcome to episode 6 of Tavern Talk this evening. The Monster Show and Tell episode here on this month of monsters that we are now in. I am Ben, also known as Meta Mongoose, over on the Crit Cats Discord. And with me this evening is my friend Sasha, who you are at this point well familiar with, as she has been with us on every Tavern Talk since the
Pretty
beginning.
much. Pretty much.
But we have a real treat for you guys today. We decided to kind of go through our list of favored monsters. These are, of course, monsters that we have either used in games or been subjected to in our various D&D experiences, or maybe just monsters that we've seen art of or read the bios for, and they were kind of formative. We looked at them, thought they were really cool, and one day hope to use them, or they just are used to kind of spawn a little bit more, uh, like ideas for other things. Like maybe an idea for a monster spun off a whole campaign, or maybe even just a cute little encounter in our various campaigns. These things happen. But anyway, with that out of the way, let us talk about our various monsters. Now, these are a lot of D&D monsters are multi generational in that they, have been around for various editions. Maybe they've skipped an edition here or there. Um, but some of them are locked behind effectively addition walls. But some of us have encountered these monsters in previous editions, and we just kind of like how they've evolved, or maybe we like certain versions of them. We'll discuss that here as well. Sasha, I believe you are up first with your first favorite monster.
Yes. My
So
favorite.
let's what is your number one or at least most favored monster to talk about this evening?
Um, yeah, one of my most absolute favorite um is the mimic. It's a very classic monster, but there's actually a lot of lore behind the mimic, surprisingly, because I actually did more like diving in and researching some of the creatures, and this is one of the ones that there was some of it that I didn't even know about mimics. Really fun. I actually used a mimic for my recent game running recently, and one of my favorite things was it was the gold pile like mimic, like the imitate gold.
Oh, just the pile of gold on the ground as a
Yeah.
mimic.
So like they went into like a giant hoard room, and there's like piles of gold everywhere, and they notice that like there's like this kind of like pile of gold kind of around, so they don't know what kind of creature it is, but I'm like, go ahead and go ahead and fight for that gold because it's going to fight you. So that
So
was
so
one of my
I've,
favorite
as
things.
we've established, mimics can be things. It's in the name. But what what is a mimic? For
For
many for people who may not know,
and they've seen it,
somehow.
especially in one of like the new movie like D&D, like Honor Among Thieves. There's
Yes,
actually a mimic in it, and people
correct.
are like, "Oh, that's a mimic," but they don't exactly know how or why. They're just kind of a
Why
weird creature
why is
that
there a
came up.
treasure chest trying to eat somebody?
Yes, and it's like for the most part, from what I read with the lore of the mimics were created by like a wizard who got tired of his loot, some of his other stuff being stolen. So he made this. magical monster thing that would protect his items by just becoming the item and essentially polymorphing themselves as whatever item they want to be, and then whatever adventurer that comes in, they just eat that adventure, get stronger from it, and a lot of the times they just keep getting bigger and bigger by how many victims they have. So they actually they have the giant teeth and like the giant tongue, and they actually secrete like this magic. It's
Like a sticky.
I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, it's like a sticky.
It's a sticky slime.
Yeah,
Kind of like a frog tongue.
yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like adhesive type goo, and it sticks to the target, and it kind of like pulls them in, and that's how people get stuck in mimic. And it kind of like whenever like you start attacking it, that's kind of what it leaks out is like this magic. And it's a really fun one because there's kind of like the theories of, are mimics always by themselves? Do mimics like, are they around each other? Do they eat each other? And it's kind of a very interesting, like, what is the life of a mimic? It's kind of, I think it just kind of depends on the story and the lore that the DM's willing. Kind of depends on how the mimics roam. I kind of have it where mimics kind of like, they're these polymorphed creatures, but they kind of become pets to certain people. So I think that's kind of how.
So your players or NPCs could arguably have like a little mimic that follows them around.
In hindsight, that's why my NPC has the that's why he has the mimic that protects his gold. Like, in hindsight, that's why he has it. So, because it protects his gold. And so that's kind of why I was like, that would work. I could see that working.
Now I don't know how far back you've gone, but in older editions, especially in like the early like second ed era, that is where they started off simple, with the basic mimic treasure chest, or their little bio write up would talk about how, generally their little, things, they can be like a chair, or like a small, like if a bigger mimic might be like a small boat on the, like a rowboat on the side of the shore, or these things that would be useful to an adventurer to lure in their prey.
Yeah.
And they don't, they tend to not prey on normal things. Like, you'd think a mimic, that's just out for dinner would, mimic a tree stump or something, and when like a deer walked by, it would just, snap out and eat it. But they seem to have a predilection for adventurers baked into their DNA.
Yeah.
So they are perfectly fine, kind of like finding themselves in a well-trafficked dungeon area, and just kind of being like, and now I'm a treasure chest, or and now I'm a bookcase, and then this kind of spiraled out of what I kind of call like projects creep, is after a little while they were like, well, if a treasure chest can be a mimic and a bookcase can be a mimic, why can't the walls be a mimic, or the floor be a mimic,
or the whole building,
or the ceiling be a mimic? And then you had
the whole cave.
And then you had those horrible like dungeon experiences in the early editions where you would go into a room and literally every surface of the room wants to eat you.
Yep.
And then eventually, of course, this spawned into, why can't the house be a mimic?
Yes.
And at this point, like, I think it kind of went a little on, like, in the in-between stages, I feel, are too far. Like, I don't mind like small treasure chests, weird little things that be like little trap monsters. Sure, that's cute. I am mildly against the whole room trying to eat you, the walls, the floors, the doors.
Yeah.
But once it becomes like the size of a house, that's just a monster house. And
Right.
that's a completely different, like, as a mimic, sure, I accept that as a mimic, but I don't know, I accept the end point and the beginning point more than I accept the middle point.
Right, right. No, I don't blame you on that one. There's actually a fun little fact when it comes to um the mimics is back actually farther back into like second edition too is that they really liked like alcohol and stuff too, so they used to drink that. So it gave me that idea of that long time ago, like that mimic that thinks it's
Oh yeah.
a and I was like, "Oh, that's perfect." So yeah, I could see how it would work. I actually had seen like I can't remember if it was on a book or it was on like graphic art by Wizard that but it was like it was an entire house that was a mimic. It was like the table was a mimic, the chairs were a mimic, like everything surrounding in the picture was a mimic. And I was like, that is so cool just to have an entire town that people don't understand why there's no people here
And when you go to
because
explore the
everything's a
abandoned
mimic.
town, the town tries to eat you.
Yeah, and it's like a whole entire it's just everything's a mimic. And I was just like that's really interesting, but I would also just leave it where there's like a comic that shows a chest and it shows like a an adventurer come up to the chest and is like, "Oh yeah," and all of a sudden he looks over and there's like this beautiful woman that's just like chained up and is like, "Help me and we'll escape together." And the adventurer just goes, "All right," and just like goes towards the beautiful woman and then she just ends up eating him. And then it just goes to the chest and the chest is like was just like, "Could you stop taking my meals?" And then the other one's like, "Adapt or die, Larry."
Right.
And I was just like, that would make sense. So I could imagine that there is a town full of mimics, but it's like some are like they actually look humanoid.
Oh, so it
And
does like that species thing where
uh-huh, I think that would be
it
interesting.
does like a mimicry of human life to the best of its ability.
Yes, I think that's hilarious. That would be fantastic. And you could go so many ways with that too. Really could. It'd be a very fun way to do certain things. And that's why I was just like, huh. But I love mimics. I think they're fantastic creatures. They're obviously very much a classic, but I still love them. I think they're fantastic.
Now, an interesting way to use mimics that I saw someone make an adventure for is this adventure called the Mimic Museum. It's a 5th ed adventure that DM Dave put out, and basically it is a spooky walk through like a national like paleontology-esque museum of D&D
Really?
monsters, but a lot of the exhibits are actually mimics that want to eat you. So
Like
it turns
that's like
like
the
really weird Night of the Museum, but the exhibits are hunting you.
yeah, like it reminded me of like a wax museum. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
That's actually a really interesting thing.
But yeah, it's so like the picture is like this, triceratops skeleton kind of set up, and as the adventurer goes to reach for it, like all of a sudden the mouth opens up and the teeth,
Yes.
because it's not really a triceratops, it's a mimic. But the whole like museum is, you're not sure at any point what any part of the museum is real or trying to eat you.
Yeah. What?
And I think that would be a fun adventure that people could use to like showcase kind of what a mimic can do, or what a group of mimics can do. You can especially in like a dark spooky museum, You could have things like scuttling around in the darkness, and then like when you
You
turn around and like
could.
put your torch over that direction or cast your light spell in that corner, everything is fine. And you have to like investigate if you want to know which thing is the deadly thing, or if you're trying to avoid the deadly monster.
Right.
But it really like amps up the creepy factor.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds definitely like a fun one, and it sounds like a really fun one shot.
So yeah, it's definitely an adventure that I think showcases the mimic in its full glory very well.
Yes, that sounds
So
fantastic. That sounds
if anyone is interested in taking the mimic to its fullest potential, that would be my suggestion is going and giving that adventure a spin and kind of
Yeah.
seeing what about it kind of works for you.
Yeah.
But moving on from the mimic, another classic monster and by extension a classic D&D monster, the cockatrice.
Yes.
The
Such a cool
the
creature.
scary chicken. So I really liked the cockatrice. It has been a favorite of mine since as far back as second ed. It is one of those monsters that is weird looking, in that it is effectively a chicken, a lizard, and in some arts, a bat. All kind of rolled into one with the extra absurdity that it can turn you to stone. Which is very dangerous, but it's a good like early, like low level experience of, and then these monsters can turn you to stone. Because like up at upper tiers, you start dealing with like your Medusas, your beholders with like special petrification eye rays, your
Yeah.
whatever else is. But like these are kind of relatively low CR monsters that your party can get a taste for, and they've gone. I feel that they've gone through quite a quite a journey in their across the editions.
Yeah.
This art here is the most recent art for fifth ed, for the cockatrice. During the third ed era, everything was drawn to look like it was starving to death, and I felt really sorry for the monsters because I was like, well, clearly they have to eat adventurers because look at them, I can count all their ribs. Um, but but the art for these monsters gives them a very kind of like velociraptor look, or like a little baby dinosaur look.
Yeah.
But still has that absurd chicken head, and so you can have a very unassuming, like the party hears like this weird hiss clucking while they're wandering a dungeon or like a rocky outcropping somewhere out in the wilds. And when they look, they peek around the corner and there's like this chicken head kind of like bobbing, across the landscape. And they're like, oh, weird chicken. And then all of a sudden it like turns and looks at them, and one of the characters gets turned to stone. And then the thing kind of like makes a weird noise and like launches at them, and they have to like run for it or fight it, as you do.
One of the two. Yeah, one of the two. Depending on, it really depends on the person who's adventuring.
But the best part is they're small sized creatures. In some instances, even tiny. They're relatively weird looking but unassuming, especially the older art. In fact, I'll share that because this is the art that sold me on the cockatrice back in the second ed era. It is adorable. It is a chicken with some bat wings and a weird little lizard tail, and got this dumb look on its face.
It looks like it hasn't slept for 7 years.
I know, right? It's like this. You could very easily confuse this with like a weird specialty chicken with like mange.
It looks like something that would spawn from like Hey Hey from Moana.
Right? Um, and like all, well, actually, like a lot of weird monsters that D&D has to offer,
Yeah.
in this respect, the basic history boils down to a wizard did it. Like there was a magical experiment that happened, and then the monsters happened because the wizard put a bunch of animal parts together and was trying for something and got this instead. Now, this doesn't, track with the, Greek and Roman roots of the cockatrice, but that's fine.
Right,
That's
right.
that's irrelevant to this particular conversation. But on on the whole, the cockatrice again, lower CR, lower ability to turn people to stone, so it does give your party like a taste of danger without accidentally wiping the party. But it can definitely put, you know, a cockier member of your party in their place really quickly if the dice don't kind of run in their favor, and that can kind of turn an encounter on its head. Now,
Right.
um, if you're interested in using cockatrices for flavor instead of like the main dish monster of an adventure,
Uh-huh.
the adventure that sold me on the cockatrice was a second ed dungeon magazine adventure from like issue like 85 called Flesh to Stone, and
I remember that
uh,
spell.
it is it is by far one of my more favorite little side trek adventures. The gist is the party runs into this area 10 here in the top corner, and uh, and while they're doing that, they see that there's like a gnome statue outside the mine entrance, and they're like, "That's weird." So they go inside and they find basically an opening into this hidden mountain vale that looks like a giant farm. It is in fact a farm for stone giants.
Yeah.
This like husband wife pair of stone giants, it has like set up a farmstead here in this little mountain vale, and the gnomes that were mining in the mountain didn't know that this was here, and while they were mining, they broke into this area, and they broke into the area next to the chicken coop, which the stone giant chickens are cockatrices.
Right.
And the cockatrices chased the gnomes around and turned several of them into stone. And the stone giant's wife liked the gnomes so much that she collected them and put them in her garden as garden gnomes. And the party has to effectively like reacquire all the gnome statues,
Yeah.
and figure out a way to get them turned back into flesh. But also, there's still a bunch of cockatrices loose on the farm. So not only are you
No.
dodging like the stone giants, but also you're trying to dodge all these loose cockatrices around. And
Of course.
it's a fun little adventure that really really kind of shows off how dangerous a cockatrice can be
Yeah.
without making them like the monster. They're literally just yard chickens. They just happen to be yard chickens for stone giants.
That is absolutely that
Um,
really.
so Yeah, I when I read through this adventure, it was a very simple sidetrack. It arguably anyone could run it as like a one shot pretty easily. There's some negotiation that you could do with the stone giants if you can talk them into not trying to kill you. I mean, they're just simple farmers. They're they think of you as like pests, but
Right.
if you can talk them out of like the hurting part, then you can see like they need you to maybe help them round up their chickens, or do something else for you, and maybe they'll trade that adventurer labor for the stone gnomes for the from the
Right.
garden, or you'd have to figure out some other deal. But there's options. It's a very interesting setup that way. But yeah, so that's cockatrices. I really like them. They're adorable little monsters. They're a really nice option for low level adventurers to get a taste of various mechanics that are going to show up later in the game,
Yeah.
on more dangerous monsters. and you can make them the serious monster of the adventure, or you can make them just an adorable weird chicken that they have to run across and deal with in some way. They
Yes.
can be the comedy aspect very easily.
They are a very interesting one, and I've actually dealt with more cockatrice in different games that weren't D&D, but they're very like fantasy heavy,
Mhm.
and they do pretty much the same thing. They'll turn you to stone if you're not too careful, and they're kind of a pain to deal with at times. Um, but yeah, one of my favorite like older games, like Tales of Symphonia, that's actually where I really first got introduced to the cockatrice, because it'll have it where it'll attack you, but you have a chance of being turned into stone if you're attacked. So it's really interesting, and the cockatrice as a whole is a very interesting that I think from that derpiest looking one was fantastic.
Oh yes, my derpy chicken.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
I said that that
I
art
love it.
that art sold me on the
I love it.
cockatrice really early in my D&D career.
I love it. That's so fantastic.
It
That
looks way more interesting to me. One, because it doesn't look like a dangerous monster. It just looks
right.
like a really weird derpy chicken monster thing. Um, and
Derpy chicken monster.
that's what you could have used to help like sell its unassuming nature until the surprise of, oh, this is a scary thing.
Yes. That it like for all it's worth for that creature, it is a pretty dangerous creature. Like it really is. And for at least like level parties, it's just like how I've heard about this is completely different, but I've heard about like a party getting entirely eliminated from shock
Oh
lizard.
yeah, yeah. Shock
And that
lizards
usually,
also
yes,
also
they also
adorable, also
yes,
dangerous.
and that would also include the fact that the party was not taking into account, you probably shouldn't mess with things.
Yeah. So that kind of closes the book on two small creatures, the mimic and the cockatrice, that are uh, unassuming in some instances, dangerous in all instances. Um, but going from there, let's bulk up to a slightly bigger monster. I believe you had the Gloomstalker on your list.
Yes, which comes from Xandria. It's
Yes,
from Wild
that's
Mountain.
a critical role monster.
Yes. That was actually you were the one who showed me that monster because I used it in my game, which it fit perfectly. And when I read some of the behavior and kind of how it works and kind of some of the lore behind it, it worked perfectly. It did exactly what I wanted it to do And it was actually a very tough fight for my players, which was my intention. And it involved a lot of story and stuff like that. But it is a really cool creature. Like this
So,
thing,
for those who don't know, what is the gist of this not dragon?
the gist of this like not dragon, it um is pretty much that gist of it. It is it is a flying creature that kind of you don't exactly know what it's made of. It kind of goes between the material and ethereal plane, so it's kind of like shifts in and out. That's why it's got that smoky appearance. So it's kind of this evil type creature that seems to really stay in shadow and dark, and it is really an interesting thing. It's very dragon-like in appearance. Why it for a dragon, but they are a creature that like understand common, which is common language could just be any language, like the universal language, and it understands it. It just can't speak it, but they're intelligent enough to like work together or work with other things, but they're not intelligent enough to discern certain.
So they're good. They're
And
good boss minion.
yeah, they're pretty much, and I used it as a boss itself because my party was trying to remember. I think my party was level when I had them fight this. Now, granted, I did like knock down some of the damage. A lot of my players tend to be like they do a lot of damage or they do a lot of like heavy mechanic stuff. So there's some things where I had to make the fight actually challenging and had to make the fight a lot harder to do because a lot of my players are a lot of veteran players. A lot of them a lot more about mechanics and stuff kind of more than I. But so this one was a lot of fun and it was a lot of fun to kind of look more and kind of understand a bit better. So it's kind of like it's kind of a shadowy not dragon.
Yeah, it definitely fits the bill for when you want a draconic monster, but you don't want to go full dragon because those are those are kind of like the premium monster. But
They
you want
yeah
you want something that's scary and draconic, but you
uh huh
don't want to like have like a full breath weapon or like a
yeah
full.
yeah
You want something just a little shy of that.
yeah. They it's shown in some of the things that the Critical Role themselves like they encountered them a lot in like Shadowfell and so a few other places. So I assume that they would probably come from a shadow like area,
hmm
which is why kind of like they fade what looks like they fade in between out of ethereal.
Now their potential tie with the Shadowfell is actually what originally drew me to them.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Shadowfell stuff in general.
Yes.
Ever since Fourth Ed was like, and now there's the Shadowfell and it's cool, and I was like, I agree. But there was there was a player in one of my games who was playing a fighter and generally speaking was being mildly outclassed by most of the other folk with spell, casting abilities. And I was trying to find a good way to kind of, give him, throw him a bone, give him a little bit of a magic bump so that he wouldn't feel as left out in that regard.
Yeah.
And I turned to the piety system that the Theros book
Oh, I
gave.
remember this character now.
And the piety system was basically you followed a god. You weren't really a paladin. You weren't really a cleric. You were just a chosen of that god. And as long as you did things that the god liked, you would gain points on like a piety track. And as your track went up, you got to do cooler and cooler and cooler things. and the capstone that I put on it, because he was playing like a Shadar Kai from the Shadowfell, and he was gonna, he followed the Raven Queen, and it was all gonna be cool. And I was like, well, if you do all the piety things and follow the track to the end, I'm gonna let you turn into a Gloomstalker at the end,
Right.
and that was a really cool toy that he was interested in doing some of the work for to get up that track.
Right.
That was a very nice, like, non, like, I didn't have to use it as a monster in the game for the party to fight. Instead, I
Right.
turned it into a reward, and it was like, once per day you can be a really cool shadowy dragon thing, and it'll be really awesome. And he kind of took to that for a little while, and so that that is one way you can use monsters that isn't definitely using them as ways to hurt the party.
Yeah.
In some instances, you can, with certain mechanics the game's already built in, you can use them as rewards. Maybe somebody wants to polymorph into something cool, but doesn't, isn't hitting the right CR for the kind of polymorph they want, or they want like a various aesthetic. If you have these kind of monsters in your back pocket, you could be like, I have an idea. Try
Yeah.
this monster. Um, Much like when you were running your game and were like, I need a cool, monster to be kind of like an end boss fight for my. I need something that my big bad can have as like a minion, but is also bulky enough to be the real fight that my big
Yeah.
bad summons. And I was like, well, you don't. Your people aren't strong enough to be fighting dragons. How about this cool thing?
Yeah.
Um, and and that kind of allowed for more, just more interesting, and it fit the theme of your game pretty well.
It did. It actually brought a lot of severity to my players to understand like the depth of like, oh, this is really bad. We're in a really bad place right now. And like they're not under they have so much more story. I have done so much more lore dump for them to enjoy. And they realize this because they realize that this was somebody who was turned into it. That's what happened in the story was this person found like an item that was like really corrupted and dark and tainted by the evil that is coming across his land, and it ended up taking her over, and she turned into this thing. And people were like, well, how'd she get the shape-shifting thing? Not a not a druid. I was like, well, she worked with druids, very friendly with Fae, and she eventually had that capability. But it's just that whole point that instead of turning into something that would be natural, she turned.
Right,
And
being existing in the shadows and the darkness, like, kind
oh
of
yeah,
tainted her transformation.
yeah, and that was the whole thing, and the party just kind of realized they were like, oh, we're pretty far deep in this, aren't we? This is pretty bad, isn't it? And that's when they realized that stuff, and they had so much more going on. But they also are slowly trying to stop other people from having the same problem. But yeah, it was just a very interesting creature that for me brought the severity of how much danger the world is under when you have this happening. And my players are like, they're like, we got to fix this. I'm like, exactly, thank you. You have a good thing to do now.
Uh, Also, I threw the image of the miniature up there because I just really like what they
Yeah,
did with the miniature for this one. Um, it definitely has a very scary look to it, and I like the diving kind of pose. You can just set
yeah.
like a little miniature up underneath it and be like, "This is going to eat you now."
Oh yeah, I love it. I absolutely adored how it looked. I loved how it functioned and combat. I love how it functions outside of combat. I just like how it is in general. And it is pretty versatile where you don't have to a lot of the times you don't have to use these monsters just to fight. You can use these for story, plot, things where players are like, I want to be that thing or I want that thing as my pet. And so there's just ways that you can get around it, which I've enjoyed about the Gloomstalker. I had a lot of fun using it. I had a lot of fun having one of their really big combats. This is one of their first big ones, which is one of my first big ones of actual labor. This is my first. I guess it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, oh, where was it? So the mostly the deal with these monsters. They can be, pretty dangerous in some respects, but also where'd it go? I had a thing for this. There it is. So the Gloomstalker in general, for those who are unfamiliar, don't have the book. The thing that makes it the most dangerous is that it has kind of like a shadow teleport ability. So not only can it fly, but while flying, it can also just, as a bonus action, teleport like 40 feet wherever it can see. And then it can snatch people up, restrain them, and like fly off with them. So you can even use this as kind of like a messenger monster that's going out to collect things. That the party, like maybe the party's supposed to be doing like a protection run, and then this shadowy monster flies over the caravan, and everyone's all freaking out about it. And then when they're off, like trying to stop it as it's attacking from one side, it just immediately teleports to the other side of the caravan and grabs like the VIP and like flies off with him.
That would be an interesting thing to do. So it gives me ideas.
And also has like a shriek power that paralyzes. So again, not it does, it's not a breath weapon that does like a vast sum of damage. It's a sonic shriek, but it can paralyze people, which will slow people down in responding to what it's doing. And with this kind of combination of really good movement powers and really good like just restraining or paralyzing people, you can put the hurt on a party very quickly. By just outmaneuvering them.
Kind of predicting. Possibly.
Yeah, it gives the party a reason to have to start considering tactics a little bit better. They can't just the fighter can't just run at the monster and just stand there and swing their sword for a while, and like the wizard just stand in the back and like shoot its spells, but then what happens when the monster just teleports directly to the wizard? Cause it can.
This one,
as a bonus action.
Yes, this one did that, and it took the one that was the like kind of higher damaging one, and then grabbed them and was like squeezing them because that was the biggest threat. So that's what it was starting to do, and they managed to get out of it, but it was still fun to be able to use things and be able to some of the mechanics that it is meant for. And my players were like, "I'm so proud of you. You made this actually a challenging fight." But yeah, it is a very strong creature, and I think it's got I think it's actually got like a screaming attack or something.
Yeah, the shriek. Like, the shriek is what does the paralyze.
Yeah, I did that, and that did help quite a bit.
Yeah, because it gives your monster like a little moment to breathe,
At least for a little bit.
It helps balance out that action economy.
Yes.
But then it can just bite and claw people. It's a thing.
Yeah, the biting and the claws. I had to kind of kick down the damage, obviously, because they were very low level and it was a higher level monster. So, I understand.
Yeah. For those interested, it is a CR6 monster. So, traditionally, like a sixth level party is about when this thing should start rolling in.
They
Uh,
were doing a lot of damage, so I gave them something hard to fight.
right. I mean, yeah, the challenge rating system in general is it's a very gut feeling kind of deal. If your party is being way tougher on your monsters, you can definitely bump it up a couple of challenge ratings and see what happens. But this is a good monster to use tactically against your party. Has a lot of good abilities and can, definitely give a party a run for its money.
Oh yeah.
Um, but anyway, after the Gloomstalker, another D&D favorite, the Owlbear.
Yes. I love that thing.
Owlbears, adorable. They are owls. They are bears. Both things fun. Both things together, extremely dangerous or fun or both. Owlbears, for those unknowing, are again a product of a wizard did it. Traditionally, though now with the advent of the Feywild, there are either stories of like the progenitor of the owlbear is just I don't know. It was one of those weird monsters from the Feywild that occasionally wanders out into the prime material plane, or the wizard who made the owlbears. The owlbears got loose and wandered into the Feywild and have been living there happily ever since. Kind of situation. It's kind of like a chicken and egg. No one really knows
Yeah.
whether how exactly they came to be where they are or why they are. But owlbears are a traditional D&D monster. They are interesting to look at. There is so much owlbear art on the internet by the millions. They are a fan favorite monster for sure.
I do
Um,
like them. I
they
think they're amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're a bulky monster. They are scary when they want to be, but you can also make them friendly, as they are literally just two animals squished together. So
Yes.
if your party thinks they can handle some animal. Now, granted, an owlbear is not technically a beast; it is, a monstrosity. But
Right.
that doesn't mean that it can't, be bribed in the way that an owl or a bear could with like a fish or
Yeah.
something. Generally these things are just hungry and or territorial,
Yes.
so you can kind of mix and match them however you want in your adventures. The Dice Camera Action Crew, the what Chris Perkins stream game from back in the day, they had a pet owlbear.
Yeah, I think I
Um,
remember that too.
that it was kind of like their group mascot animal of sorts. Um, so that was kind of a fun little add-on. I forget exactly where they picked up the owlbear cub, but they kind of adopted it along the way, and it kind of grew into an owlbear that they raised. Um, Generally speaking, it's a decent introduction to weird D&D monsters for new players. That has parts of animals that people understand. You know, it's like
Yeah.
if you have a brand new group of players around the table and they're wandering through like an enchanted forest, and then you're like, and then you see an owl bear, and they're like, a what? And you're like, what part of that did you not understand? It is an owl. It is a bear. It is an owl bear. Um,
Yes.
and then you describe it to them, and then it's very easy to grasp. Again, you can fight them. You can play with them. They're sprinkled through a lot of published adventures in both aspects. You can find owlbear cubs just on everywhere. If you look around hard enough in a published adventure, there's something somewhere. Now, one of the adventures that I enjoy the most is from issue 213. This is during the 4th ed era of Dungeon Magazine. Owlbear Run. Now, I don't remember, Sasha, if you ever took part in an owlbear run that I did.
No, I don't think I have.
And I've talked about I think I've talked about this adventure before, but essentially it uses owlbears not particularly as the monster, but as a means for the adventure to happen.
Just by looking at the cover, it sounds fantastic.
The gist is the party gets swept up into a local game that a pair of cities takes part in every year. There are some wizard brothers that are running kind of like this big festival between the two towns, and every year they do something weird. Like they'll flood the valley and have like a giant naval battle here in the mountains, or they'll do like a really cool arena fight with like cool magic effects. But this year they've decided that the groups are going to race owlbears across the mountain from one town to the next. And so they've acquired a bunch of owlbears from the Feywild and the local surroundings, and each of the various nobles is sponsoring an owlbear. Each of the owlbears has names and personalities, and the party gets to go and try to talk a noble into letting sponsoring them for the event. And if you get sponsored by noble, you get that noble's owlbear to use in the event.
Right.
And the gist is, you at the starting line, you and the other teams all have an owlbear and a leash, and the goal is to get from one town to the next before the other teams. And the owlbears generally do not want to play along in this. None of the owlbears are happy about being here. They were perfectly fine, eating berries or fish in the wilderness, when all of a sudden they got kidnapped and thrown in like some stables. So your job is to get a grumpy owlbear across the mountains before the other teams get their grumpy owlbear across the mountains.
That sounds fantastic.
It's a very fun adventure. I wholeheartedly suggest for anyone who wants an interesting adventure that has a lot of decision points, because you have to plan your route across the mountain, and there are certain basically encounter points where there's like strange mountain problems. Like I think there's like some orcs that live up in the mountains that are really jealous that other people are getting to have fun, and they want to steal your owlbear and win the race because they think that they will get a prize if they win the race with your owlbear. And then you have to deal with the other teams, because the other teams have their routes effectively pre-planned, and if your route ever crosses one of their routes, then you have to deal with what happens if you cross paths with another team. The nobles are all vying to win, so each of them has like a little encounter out on the mountain that you could stumble across, where it's like if there's like a checkpoint on like a bridge, and it the local constable and his guys are slow rolling like everyone across the bridge, and if the noble that's sponsoring you happen to be like the lord of the guard, then they'll just let you right across. But if not, you'll have to wait in line with everyone else or figure out some other way around. And so like all the nobles have like tricks and stuff up their sleeves so that you can get ahead or get behind. It's a fun race. And then each of the owlbears has a personal mission hiding up in the mountains somewhere. Like one of the owlbears is pregnant.
Oh no.
And you don't know that at the start of the race, unless like you happen to have like a druid or something in the party that can figure it out early. But at some point, it's gonna want to lay its egg, and then it's gonna want to stay with its egg. So you have to figure out how to navigate that. Or one of the owlbears, uh, their mate, you run across their mate out in the mountains,
Oh no.
and the owlbear of course wants to be with its mate instead of you. And so you have to figure out a way to like peacefully resolve the situation, because if you kill the other owlbear, then your owlbear definitely doesn't want to be with you.
That sounds insane.
Um,
That sounds insane.
and then the other teams, some of them can be pretty mean. Like one of them is a bunch of elves, led by an Eladrin who's from the Feywild, so she can talk to owlbears. So if she ever runs across your owlbear, she like talks to it and tells it to like act out and be mean.
Fantastic.
But yeah, it's a very fun owlbear centric adventure where arguably you never fight an owlbear willingly. Like there's a lot of opportunity to fight owlbears, but you really shouldn't ever be fighting the owlbear. The whole goal is to work with the owlbear and like empathize with the owlbear and like resolve its weird story problems, and like one of the owlbears needs therapy. It's it's
These
got
are-
it's got it's got a it's got like a cowardice issue, and you have to like somehow, like it gets attacked by like a pack of wolves at one point. You have to like help it regain its courage. So you have to like give the owlbear therapy.
Tell me how you feel.
But yeah, this is a fun owlbear adventure. And again, like as an example to DMs out there, none of these monsters have to be a monster that the party fights. A lot
Yeah,
of these,
no, I
they can just be like set dressing, or they can be a piece of the adventure that kind of moves the story forward without actually being a combat.
That's also like the same thing with some story stuff, because I know people during like the newer movie or whatever, where like the druid there
Oh, turned into an owlbear?
yeah, people are so freaked out and they were so angry about it, and I was like, that's really cool.
Right. Well, that, and it was also like correct. They are correct. Arguably, owlbears are not beasts, so druids can't wild shape into them. But two things. One, that was cool. Let it
That's the
happen.
yes, that was the main reason. That's why I loved it.
And two, Wizards was kind of considering getting rid of the whole beast tree. Collect a list
Uh-huh.
of Pokemon stat blocks that your druid can
Yeah.
turn into, and instead just assume some kind of bestial form that's animal-ish. And arguably an owlbear would fit under that without being an issue. Now they've
Yeah.
walked that back a little bit, I think, since their current like playtesting some new druid ability.
Yeah.
But like it would have been fine, and even if it wasn't, who cares? It was cool.
Yeah, that's why I loved it, and I know that people are like, no, you can't have druids be owlbears. I'm like, look, I get the technical like aspect that you have there, but you can have these different things. I mean, everything's made up and the points don't matter. So
Right.
like you can kind of just make what you want, and you kind of just like the rules are there just kind of to give you like a baseline of what you. And then when you get further deeper into it and you get further in there, you kind of expand to your own thing, kind of just do your own thing. Like Wizards literally just like, yeah, just do whatever. We don't care. They're like, yeah,
Um,
here you go. You want a stat for this thing? We got it right over here.
right?
That's kind of what Wizards has been starting to do.
Yeah. Now another owlbear centric, the a owlbear centric adventure where it is more about the history of the owlbears that I've run before, is called Birds of a Feather. Birds of a Feather is a published adventure that was put out on like the DM's Guild, and it is effectively a story about the magic that created owlbears. The gist of the adventure is that there is a adorably deranged Kenku wizard that is a bird person because he's a Kenku, and he knows owlbears exist, and at some point he managed to find like the wizard's tower of the wizard who at one point made owlbears. He just found like this abandoned tower, and while he was exploring it, he discovered the spell that made owlbears. And because he's a Kenku and has perfect mimicry, and is a wizard and understands how arcane stuff works, he was like, I can make different owlbears. So then he just started squishing birds and other animals together to see what would come of it. So you'd get, your boar hawks and what's my other monster stat blocks that were really exciting? A lot of pun names in here, by the way. So you've got your boar hawks, your bulkatoos,
Bulkatoos.
your crane stags, your crowbolds. It's kobolds but crows.
Oh, wouldn't that just be another version of a Kenku?
A little bit. The Ravern is a raven wyvern that he made. And the Featherwood is literally he squished together a treant and a bird, and made a tree where its leaves are feathers.
Oh my gosh. That actually sounds really weird to think of, just imagining Treebeard with feathers and
So yeah, just like this tree, but instead of leaves, it has like fancy feathers that like break off and like float in the wind. But like I said, this is an interesting adventure. That the gist of it, deal with the Kenku who's making all of these weird owlbear-esque monsters. He has learned the magic of making owlbears and will not stop until he has made every kind of weird combination he can think of.
oh my god.
So this is another, like, maybe you wanna use an owlbear, but you're like, owlbears are old hat. May I interest you in a boarhawk? It is a boar. It is a hawk. It is a boarhawk.
It's a bork.
Yeah, it's a bork. But yeah, so you don't, just because owlbear exists as a template, you can also use it for other things.
Oh, it is fantastic. That is actually something I had never heard of before. I think that, considering how that makes sense for a Kenku minded, make it. I like that. That's actually something that I'd be interested in, for even like, there could be even a fun thing that I would do with the druid where they're cursed and they have to do some kind of form that involves this, like a bird and another creature slapped together because they were cursed, and there's no way to like remove it. Like it's got plot armor, so you have to like go through the plot in order to remove the curse.
Yeah,
That would be a fun one.
It's definitely an interesting kind of sidetrack that you could do as kind of like a little mini quest in an adventure that introduces, once you've already introduced owlbears, what other monsters could you squish together?
pretty
But
much.
but yeah,
That's why I love it.
again, Owlbear's really classic. But if you don't, if you wanna be a little, if you wanna swerve a little, instead of going the beaten path, consider some other animal bird hybrids. It's got a cultural touchstone that people can kind of get behind, but also has that like just weird extra.
I love that I love the first one. I think is the Bork. That's the one that cover there.
Uh,
The
but
the
yeah, so
hawk
if
Bork.
you're interested in this particular adventure, definitely go check it out. I'm positive that I got this off of the DM's Guild, and I'm slightly certain that I got it for free. And it is worth more than that by far. I may have
I
to.
think it's interesting. I think it's so interesting. I really do. I think it's a very fun one. Just in general. I've not touched any of it, but just you talking about it and like
Yeah,
discussing
I
these
ran
things,
this
I
for a
just
convention crowd once, and they had just a blast. They were like, "Wait, what is going on here? Why are there more different bird monsters floating around this forest?"
that's fantastic. No,
So,
I have characters that are just like, oh, I can come up with this kind of idea and have it play off of this book in general.
yeah, so just kind of consider that clearly somebody made owlbears. Arguably their research, though theoretically lost to time, may be a thing that your party finds or some villain finds
Right?
and starts
We're
making a weird bird army.
right. I actually have noticed that like with the one we have here, we have like classic monsters. Like the owlbear was the start along with the mimic. So having like all these classic or monsters, but we have there's so many different variations.
Yeah, that is one of the things that because they've been around so long, you get you get a lot of variation over time because people just want to start innovating, and you get some fun adventures like this one. This is a really good one. Uh, but turning from owlbears, let's move more to the top of the food chain. Because you told me that you were interested in talking about some dragons.
Yes. When it comes to Dungeons and Dragons as a whole, dragons are my favorite thing. This thing is the Moonstone Dragon. I had just heard about it. I had just seen it like not even a couple weeks ago. And actually one of my friends, he actually pulled out of one of the like blind boxes or whatever that you get for miniatures. He actually got the Moonstone Dragon and he showed it to me and I looked and I was like, this thing looks so cool. So I was like, I love this thing. This thing looks so fantastic. And you were like, all right, it's monster time. And I was like, all right, cool. That's one of them. Unless somebody wants to go over dragons as a whole. You know that a lot of people just love dragon creatures and stuff. But Moonstone Dragon is, it's just so cool. I just think it's fantastic.
So
Because the
you said
way,
you found out about Moonstone Dragons a few weeks ago. So
yes, I had never heard
what
of them.
other than did like what they look like drew you in like right out of the gate, or did you?
Yeah, looking at the figure.
Okay, so the figure is what sold you on it. And since then, what have you learned about these monsters?
I learned about it. I kind of because I've always really enjoyed dragons as a whole, and I love kind of how they're their own social stuff and how they have these different personalities. And it's like Moonstone dragons, kind of like they're kind of introverted. They tend to keep to themselves in that way. Like they don't care about human things or like any other really like material type things. Like especially for like species, but they tend to be very playful, mischievous, and a lot of the times they when they grow older they start becoming wiser and start becoming teachers and storytellers to like their own young. But what I loved about them is they're a gem dragon, and I think gem dragons are really I don't
There's a
necessarily
pun
know
there.
how they came about. Yes. Yes. But it's just kind of like how these ones, even when they when they die, they just turn into moon. That's what something that I absolutely loved. It was so cool when I read about these. And so like I pretty much found them on Wiki and I just started like reading all of these things. So I have it open right now as I'm like looking through as I'm talking. And so yeah, they usually tend to stick to themselves. They love to stay in like things like the Feywild or like Sylvan regions, and they don't really like to go anywhere kind of outside of there. Usually where, but a lot of the times they'll, if they care for like anybody, it's usually artists or poets or like doing good deeds for them or something along those lines. But they, instead of like gold or copper, they tend to like go for platinum and silver, shiny mithril. So instead of like the shiny gold of gold, they want the shiny silver. So they prefer silver over gold. So they prefer more of
the
the
the cool
the
reflective
cooler
color.
colors. Yeah. And they also tend to like value a lot of art, and sometimes it could be art that's just a painting, or it could be a beautiful song, or some kind of beautiful story, or it could be something as simple as like somebody's hair, like a loved one's hair or something like that. So it is really cool, and even then, they sound like such interesting creatures. They feel like fey creatures, but they're not. They kind of just like fey things, but kind of stay outside of it. They're like, we really like this. This is our aesthetic, but everything else we
But
don't
we're
care
still
for.
dragons. We want you to
But
know
we're
we're
still
still
dragons.
dragons.
And so it's like they have this kind of lore where people think that they kind of live on like moonbeams, and they have like nectar or whatever is like what they consume, and that they're not carnivorous like regular dragons are. But that's kind of just how they are assumed to be.
So this is the art that got published when the rest of the Gem Dragons
Yes.
came out in the Fizzbands book, I believe.
Yeah, I had never
Um,
heard of them
but
until
have
recently.
you seen the concept art for these
No,
dragons?
I don't think I have. The
Well,
the
I
wiki
I
itself
gathered the concept art.
the
Uh,
wiki itself has there's a second edition and then a fifth edition. I see the second edition.
uh,
But
so this
oh, look
this
at
is this
that.
is what the concept art looks like, and
Oh, those look so cool.
I know, right? I really enjoy the head crescent, kind of looking like a crescent moon.
Yeah.
That was an interesting choice, but I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Um, and I do like that these are dragons that you could sprinkle into a Feywild adventure
Oh, I
where
want to
they
so
aren't
bad.
technically of the Feywild, but they just exist there. Again, don't have to be a monster you can fight. They may be a monster that puts you on a quest. Maybe you want something from this dragon. Maybe it has some kind of really important family relic art piece thing that some noble needs for reasons, and the the dragon's like, I'll trade, but you need to go get
Right.
me something extra cool to
Yes.
facilitate the trade.
Yes.
Um,
I think I love the look of it. Love the look. And like even though they're supposed to be kind of that, I would say mystical type feel to them, they are still very terrifying.
right?
And that's what I think I love about them. And I think it's because of like their long neck,
hmm
for like how thin it is compared to their whole body.
I do
I think
like
I
the
think it's
the the skinny lith dragon as opposed to like the chunky like muscle dragon.
yes. Oh, it's such a cool looking thing. And that's why I love about it. And I love different styles of dragons. Like I love the classic type looking dragons, the ones that like, you see from movies and storybooks like way back when. and then you know we evolved to these kinds of, and they are just even. You can even see that they have concept of the claws, so
Yeah.
you can look at them up close too.
They kind of remind me
It's
of like cat paws.
They do. They remind me of that too. And that's kind of why I love it. So like I would assume that if we had a Feywild, that cat creatures would absolutely be type creatures.
But
Anyways.
but yeah, I really like that concept art. Now I found another one that is kind of like of a I don't want to say it's of a dying moonstone dragon, uh, but it has kind of like it seems to be leaking moonlight out of its chest.
Oh, look, oh, that's so gorgeous though.
But I don't know if that's kind of like an idea of like the moonstone dragon like giving life to this area, like
Yeah.
sharing its draconic power with its new like home or something.
Uh,
But I like this particular art, and I think this would be an interesting scene. Like this is the kind of art that builds like an encounter scene
mm-hmm.
where like the party is wandering through this forest. They hear something in the darkness when the with the moon out, and as they're wandering through, they find where the moonbeam lands, and it's here on this dragon that's kind of replenishing this land, or I don't even know if it's like marking its territory effectively with this, and they need to decide like, are they going to fight this dragon? Are they going to negotiate with this dragon? Like, they seem to have walked in on something a little sacred or a little,
Yeah.
personal to the dragon. Or maybe the dragon is injured after fighting some other monster and is needing help being healed, and or they need the party to help ward off some other dragon or some other monster of draconic might that kind of threatens its area.
Oh, it looks. It's such a it's a beautiful piece of art. I love how it looks. But yeah, I could absolutely see that happening, and I could see it where it could be that it's injured, and maybe the party has to come find it and try to help it in some way. Now, it also says that moonstone dragons actually have the capability of like going into people's
Yes.
and talking to them in their own like language. So like when they're talking, they're understanding them perfectly, and like the moonstone dragon just kind of like tells them or asks them to do something
Yeah.
along those
They're
lines.
like weird dreamwalkers.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Which
they
is
do the
something
dream
that's
walking,
also
yeah.
cool. I absolutely love that. I'm like I love moonstone dragons. I was like I read all this stuff. I was like I love how they look. I had never really seen them before. When I look at the second edition one, I think I've seen that picture before. But I'm not 100% sure. Either way, it is fantastic, and it could have been in one of the older dragon books when I was really heavy into
There were a
3.5.
lot of dragons during the
Oh
second ed
yeah.
era. There are so many. Like there's a surprising list of dragons from just the second ed monster manual that I could talk about for a long time that never made uh, the the cross between various editions. They're either trapped in like second or third ed. They never made it to fourth, or they never made the jump to fifth. Um,
Yeah, they just released him into fifth, I think.
yeah, well, the Moonstone one they did, yeah, with Fizz bands. That's where we got all the gem dragons back. We haven't really had. I mean, I think they were in third ed, but I don't. We didn't really have gem dragons that mattered since like second edition.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that they were in 3.5. I remember them in 3.5, but they weren't very prominent because they weren't
Well,
very
it was also like late stage 3.5.
yeah.
Um,
That's why.
like it was one of those splat books along with all of the other splat books along with all of the
Yeah,
other
it
splat
was.
books. So you
Yeah.
could have blinked and missed it entirely.
Yeah, because I remember I looked at some of them because there was like there's like an obsidian dragon that like lived in the like Underdark, and so like Drow kind of those ones.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was called the Obsidian.
Yeah,
I
probably.
don't
I
remember.
don't
I
know.
just remember that it's a dark one, and like it's like a like pure black one, and it was like it was very common around Drow, but I wasn't sure because I remember some of the like images and stuff. And there's some other ones. One of the ones that I knew a lot more was the Jade Dragon
Mm-hmm.
because I had a character transition into a Jade Dragon and took over like the responsibility of like cleansing the taint of the world, and that's what Jade Dragons did in that world. Slash, I think that's what they did mechanically in
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have a shared friend
Oriental
who was a big
Adventures.
fan of Jade Dragons. One of them. Because I remember talking to him about it a while back. But but yeah,
But
he was
yeah,
a big fan of Jade Dragons. But yeah, so
okay.
that, yeah,
I
there
think
were
I
a
know who
lot
it
of
is. I think I know who it is. I think
there
I'm remembering.
there were a lot of like rock and gem dragons to go with your colored dragons to go with your metal dragons, and then just a bunch of other like weird concept dragons. In fact, speaking of weird concept dragons, now that we've talked about the Moonstone
Oh,
dragon, let's discuss some dragons that didn't really make it into the fifth ed era, that are some of my favorite dragons.
yeah.
And these are the catastrophic dragons from fourth
Yeah, you did.
edition.
Yeah, you brought this up. Oh, wow.
Now these are the ones shown here, and there are a few others as well. But the art for the dragons also did not make it very far into common internet finding. Um, and other than going downstairs and taking pictures out of my uh, books downstairs, I had to work with what I got. But we
Right.
have the blizzard dragon, the typhoon dragon, and the tornado dragon up top, and then the earthquake dragon and the volcanic dragon underneath. There were also basically an avalanche dragon that was mostly just made up of rocks in the shape of a dragon, and a wildfire dragon, which was literally just a massive fire in the shape of a dragon.
That reminds me of kind of old Greek-esque mythology. Had the Titans that were
Yeah.
made to bring
And these
catastrophic
are
elements.
kind of similar story. So the deal with these particular dragons was that during the fourth ed era, when they were kind of explaining their cosmology, that's where the Dawn War kind of made prominence, where in the beginning the gods fought the primordials to figure out who would basically rule over the world, and
Right.
during that fight, uh, Io, the dragon god, got ripped in half by one of the primordials, which is how we get Bahamut and Tiamat, the two halves of Io. And when that happened, a handful of dragons went, maybe we're on the wrong side. Our god just
Right.
got ripped in half. um, and they left the side of the gods and went to the primordials and said, maybe we want to be on your side? And the primordials said, that sounds like a great idea. Follow us over here. And they basically transformed these dragons into you know ideals of catastrophes, of forces like elemental forces of nature bound into a draconic shell.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how these dragons were born. And the thing that I liked about them was that do not they do not play like a normal dragon.
Yeah.
Because normal dragons, you know, they're flying, they bite you, and they have a breath weapon. Like that's the gist of a normal dragon. The catastrophic dragons do not have breath weapons. They have basically an elemental catastrophic aura that grows over time and then explodes in full force every 3 or 4 turns.
Jesus.
So like on the first turn, they had like a small aura, like let's take the Blizzard Dragon for example. At the beginning of its first turn, it had like a 1 square around it in all directions aura that dealt cold damage to anyone and maybe blinded people who tried to attack it up close because of all the swirling snow around it. And in the second turn, that became like a 3 square around it aura. And then like a 4 square around it aura on the third turn. And on the fifth turn, there was like a massive flash freeze in this big area around it that targeted everyone in the area. And then the cycle started again. So every turn the catastrophe grew and grew and grew and then exploded in its full might and then shrank back down to start the cycle anew. And every one of these dragons had a themed catastrophe that happened around them while they fought.
Yeah. That is a fantastic. Sound terrifying.
It was an interesting take on how to use dragons in a new and exciting way. Now, granted, it worked better in the 4th Ed era because it was a more map based combat system. But even in today's gaming landscape, where especially with people who are playing like a virtual tabletop that uses a grid to do movement, you could very easily try to port one of these dragons over and give your party a very interesting and different experience. And just the way the dragons look, like I really like the one that sold me the most was the Blizzard Dragon. Like it just looks like a weird elemental monster that happens to also be a dragon.
Yeah.
And just it gives the party a familiar touchstone in the monster that they're fighting, but also makes for an interesting combat because what they're expecting isn't what they're going to get.
Yeah.
Like when the party rolls in and they're like, "Oh, it's a dragon. Watch out for the breath weapon."
They're like, "It's a dragon," and you're like, "It's not."
Well, it is. It is a dragon. But the breath weapon is not something you have to watch out for.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Where it's like, "Oh, it's not that kind of dragon."
Right. It doesn't.
I'm not that kind of dragon.
It turns out it doesn't have a breath weapon.
It's
like whenever it has a different tactical issue. Yeah.
Like I had a paladin in my game. I was like, all right, give me a religion check. I'm not that kind of paladin. Really? Ah! It's like, all right, cool. This dragon has a breath weapon. It's not that kind of dragon. What?
There are other kinds of dragons? Oh yes. Yes, there are other kinds of dragons.
That is hilarious.
But I like the idea of these kind of dragons being, harbingers of catastrophic events to a local area. Like if there's an unseasonable winter that has rolled in, or there seems to be like little aftershocks that are rumbling through the kingdom and no one can really figure out why. And the party's, going out to figure it out. The problem doesn't immediately read as dragon. And then the party finds that it is a dragon, and then they find that it's not a dragon that acts the way they expect it to. So it's a lot of mystery to your monster. And these
Yeah.
are again monsters that they're published now. Granted, they're published in like fourth edition, but that hasn't stopped any number of people from doing various conversions online. And you're free. If you're watching this and are interested in kind of pulling these into your games, all you have to do is pick your kind of catastrophe and build like a little growing aura around it, and that's the dragon's main deal.
Yeah.
Um,
That's still that is still fan.
but yeah, they're really cool dragons. I'm of
They
of the
definitely
of the
sound it.
draconic groups, because you have your chromatic dragons and your metallic dragons and your gem dragons and
Yeah.
your weird other none of the above pile. But the catastrophic dragon group is by far one of my more favorite dragon like collectives.
Yeah. There that reminds me, there's actually a book that came out, and I believe it's a third party book called Legendary Dragons. And it has various different like new dragons they brought in. They're not like catastrophic dragons.
Hmm.
But they bring in all these different other kinds. There's like a spirit-esque dragon. They have like, I think they have like a bone type dragon too. One of like pure horror. It's really cool.
Yeah, like weird
And
concept dragons.
weird concept dragons. They are so interesting. And they also have a fiend dragon, which people probably know which is one. I have not shut up about this one because I absolutely love this thing. That is called Fury, Queen of Hell, and she is a terrifying thing. She's obviously an epic level type monster to fight, and pretty much has like a draconic horde that is like worthy of the devil because she mostly lives in that plane. And she actually has like the abilities where um she can literally change you to the fiend template on top of your other stuff, but she also has attacks and abilities that give you extra damage and disadvantage if you are a fiend or a celestial. So like she has these ways of like, I'm going to change you into this thing, and then you're in this home plane, I'm going to shunt you out because you're not from this plane. I'm going to shunt you away. And another one is like, oh, so you're technically from this plane, so I'm still going to do a lot more damage to you regardless.
Hmm.
And it is a really interesting, like she's a really interesting baddie, and she has some shapeshifting because she has a fiendish form that usually she used because that's some of her like greatest accent, word English is hard, assets. Some of her greatest assets is like lying and charming people and convincing people to do things she wants to do without actually having to fight. And then she has, when she wants to travel through like the multiverse, essentially, she has a draconic form that she will take that actually is pretty terrifying too. That does more damage, necrotic or celestial, depending on fiend or celestials.
Yeah, that vaguely
Radiant damage.
reminds me, power level wise. That reminds me of a Chardalon, which is
Yeah.
a like a big great worm red dragon that had bound a Balor demon in his chest, and now has like the powers of like the most powerful red dragon and the most powerful like demon that he could get his hands on, squished together into one monster.
Yes. That one sounds it's that one sounds
He's a pretty well known like named D&D dragon.
yeah.
But yeah, it has that kind of a feel where dragons start getting powerful enough, they start doing really weird things.
Yeah, some of these like just from this book alone is like really cool. Some of them just look amazing. But some of them just look amazing. They have so much wonderful art. They even have one that is called like Yor Mungand, which is like a world serpent. So they made a world serpent dragon that you can fight. And I looked at some of this and I was like, man, this is some stuff that I would think about if I wanted to do like a sailing type game. And they just gave me so many different ideas. And there's fine that is absolutely terrifying. Oh, that's where it is. I have like there's like a PDF book. And it's called Salathir, and it's Suffering Made Flesh. And this thing looks terrifying. And I was like, "What is this thing?" It is an interesting creature, but it is also very terrifying.
But anyway, so now that we've made it to the end of our dragons, that's just a quick. Well, not so quick. We've been going at it for about an hour and change now.
Yeah.
Almost 2 hours now.
Yeah.
But no, this is just a quick look at a handful of monsters that we like. Now, granted, the more monsters you know, the more monsters you'll grow to like. So definitely, enjoy skimming through a monster manual here and there.
Yeah.
Enjoy looking at third-party published monster manuals. Uh,
Yeah.
Third-party publishers are also innovating with fun monsters and cool ways to, get, art that kind of spawns new adventure ideas. I especially love monster manuals that come with monster ecology notes. So you can kind of get a
Yeah.
feel for a monster other than just the art and the monster stat block. Second Ed was really good about that, where not only did you have to get the monster stat block, but you also got like a really nice write up of the life cycle of the monster,
Yeah.
where it lived, why it lived there, how it felt about things. Fourth edition was also really good about that in a weird way. Their monster manual had encounter groups uh, that were like little sample encounter groups that sometimes left really interesting questions behind, like why are these groups of monsters playing together? Or some of these make sense, but one of these is not like the other in this group. How did that come to be? And that just asking those questions kind of help build an entire encounter system in and of itself.
Yeah.
So, like I said, the more monsters you go see, the more you'll find favorites of. The more you find favorites of, the more likely you are to use them in games and kind of use them in entertaining ways, so that your party, is just more well-rounded. We're not all fighting the same monsters all
Yes.
the time.
Yeah. That's why honestly, it's like I delved into a lot of Fae and Fae creatures. I love Fae creatures. Absolutely adore them, and I always play Fae creatures. I've also played like Goblin and Goblinoids, and a lot of the fun type things. A lot of the chaotic style creatures, and I really enjoy those things. I also really enjoy things that are races now that used to be just monsters, and like the goblins, the kobolds. I think Kenkus too,
Yeah,
where they
Kinkus
used
were
to be
originally just monsters.
just
Now they're
straight up
now they're
monsters,
races.
and now they're races. And I was like, I love that, and I think it's because people were like, I want to play this, and so I really like that. It's also the same thing with certain um other creatures too. Like then there was the Dragonborn too. Love the Dragonborn. And there's like some other things. That one wasn't like a monster beforehand. It's just
Not the
now.
Dragonborn. They were birthed out of
Yeah,
the fourth ed era as just straight up
yeah,
character race. But there were
yeah.
like
Because
draconian monsters
yeah,
in like the second and third ed era. So
yeah.
that's
Because people
kind
were
of their
like, I want to play
genesis.
this. Yeah, and people were like, I want to play like a Dragonborn thing. And 3.5 had it where it's like you had to like follow a particular. You had to follow
There was a lot of steps.
Baphomet, and like you had to go through this ritual, and people had to watch your egg while you sat there and rebirthed into a dragonborn.
Hmm.
But I liked that fourth ed just came out with, nah, you're just born that way,
Well,
and I'm like, see,
that
I
was
like that.
that was one of my I remember reading. So when Fourth Ed first came out, before it hit shelves, there were the game stores had like little pamphlets,
Yeah.
and I'm really sad that our local game store doesn't have them stashed away anymore in like a pile. Or at least he hasn't found any last I've asked. But they used to have like little brochures for each of the main races and classes that you were going to be able to play in 4th edition. And so there was a pamphlet, like a little brochure for the Dragonborn. And it was, why do people want to play a Dragonborn? Like, why are we letting people play dragons? And like the first thing on the list is, "'Cause dragons are cool!" Exclamation point. And then it got various levels of more serious as the points went down. It was like
Yeah.
we decided that people kept asking for it, and we figured we could balance it, and it worked out great. So here's your Dragonborn. But I always liked it. Like the first bullet point was, because dragons are cool.
Dragons are cool.
They're half of the name. It's Dungeons and Dragons.
Dragons. Why not be able to play it? Like,
Right.
it's great. No, I love that. And I loved it when it really came out. That was like probably the only thing from Fourth I really like enjoyed, was that I was like, oh, you mean they have just like an origin now? Like they're not
Yeah.
like some kind
Yeah.
of
They're
weird
just a race.
ritual through
You can
religion.
just have them.
And it's like, yeah, you can just be one. Like they're in existence. Like they're just made. And I was like, oh, that's great. I love that. I absolutely love that because it's very much enjoyable. And I hope to see future monster like creatures kind of become races as a whole. I would love to see that more like versatility and everything because of the more sentient style races that come around, because even then, we have like Spelljammer, which really extends that too, with like the plasmoids
Hmm.
and a few others, which the plasmoids I think is fantastic. I
I
love
love
that.
them.
I'm like, I love that you're equivocally a gelatinous cube in human
Or just
form.
an ooze. I'm just
Or
just a
an
walking
ooze.
ooze.
Yes. I love that. I love seeing it. And there's another case where there's like the Warforged, which is also a wonderful, really cool looking race with you're essentially artificially built people, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And some of them have even like, the fact that like you a Warforged and you can be a druid is like something I found very
Transform
interesting.
and roll out.
Yeah.
Beast Wars. We're doing it.
I actually had somebody do that in a game. It's not my game, but one of my friends did it in someone else's game, and I was just like, oh, "You did not!" And he just turned himself into a zoo, and I was just like, "Of course,
Yep. That's
of
that's a
course you
thing.
did."
But anyway, I think this should wrap us up at this point. We have gushed about monsters, I believe, long enough this evening. Though we
Right?
probably could go on if we really, really wanted to. Um,
Maybe.
but anyway, so this brings us to the end of episode 6, the Monster Show and Tell. We've made it 6 episodes so far. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so yeah, it's been fun so far. I hope you all who've been watching this now or later on YouTube enjoy it as well. If you like what we do and would like there to be more of it, consider liking and or subscribing to either our Twitch channel or our YouTube channel or both. The links to our Discord are down below as well. If you want to come out and hang with us, talk about things, we love talking about monsters and other D&D related things on our Discord. And we also have your standard social medias, your Twitches, which we are now on, your TikToks, I believe, your Twitters, should they still exist, Facebooks, all those other fun places, Instagrams. Feel free to visit any of those links and socialize with us however you feel comfortable. If you happen to have a Twitch or Prime subscription because you have an Amazon Prime subscription, it is, and you're not using it, it is free and would really help us out if you send it our direction. If you have a free one and would like to toss it around, Amazon does not need your money. In this regard, it is free money that you can throw wherever you want, and we would like it. But other than that, again, brings us to the close. It was fun talking with you all, and definitely swing by our YouTube channel, or if you're watching this later on the YouTube channel, check out some of our other content. We have several D&D campaigns that we have up on our YouTube channel. Some of our Crit Cat group is currently doing a playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, and they have been posting those videos. I believe they do it semi-weekly, bi-weekly-ish. I know they just posted an episode last night, and that was a fun watch. So definitely swing over there, see what they got going on, and we will see you all again next month. We decided we're doing these the third Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, the third Tuesday.
Third Tuesday of the month seems to be our current spin on this. So we will see you all next month for more exciting times. Other than that, we will see you all later. Bye.
Bye.